on the run and far away from home. Finally, free of your awful excuse for a mother. You've just gotten off the bus after a long journey. Next step, find the apartment where your boyfriend is waiting for you. All of a sudden, police surround you, put handcuffs on your wrists, and throw you into the back of a patrol vehicle. What is going on? And why do they keep calling you Isabella? Your name is Samantha. You're confused, but not scared. This is clearly just a big misunderstanding. Once inside the interrogation room at the station, they show you pictures of Isabella.
That's you.
She's pretty.
Yeah, you're a pretty girl.
And sure, you see the resemblance, but it's clearly not you.
What kind of a grand coincidence would it be that you just happen to look like this person?
Grand coincidence. It's a coincidence.
And you are not going to confess to a crime that you didn't commit.
I'm not going to lie to you and tell you I'm a murderer.
No matter how much they yell and scream at you.
Don't tell me how to do my job.
Call you names.
Soulless.
No conscience. You're one of the most evil person I've ever sat across the table from.
You guys are really mean.
Or try to intimidate you.
Stop calling me Isabella.
That's your name.
No, it's not.
It is too.
No, it isn't.
You would never murder anyone.
Did it feel good?
It's disgusting. You guys really think I'm a murderer?
But slowly, you begin to fear that nothing you say will convince them you're telling the truth.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
No, it isn't. And I'm really angry that you ruined my day and made it even worse.
Well, welcome to the rest of your life.
Born in 1995 in the postcard setting of Aurora, Colorado, Isabella Guzman was by all accounts a lucky kid. Yep, while little is known about Isabella's early life, it was undoubtedly a cushy little position to be birthed into. The only child of two doting parents, whose world essentially revolved around her. Even her mother's photography business, Bella's Portrait Studio, was seemingly an ode to her daughter, in not only name, but spirit, as it's here she spent long days working to provide for her little girl. Yet, despite Isabella undoubtedly being the center of her mother, Young-mi, and father Robert's respective universes, it seemed they were not the center of each other's. And so, by the time Isabella was 3 years old, the Guzman family's illusion of domestic bliss was shattered with one devastating blow: divorce. And while Isabella's parents were able to find happiness with new partners, as her mother's new husband, Ryan Hoy, would later tell police, Isabella wasn't happy at all.
She seems very depressed. She seems horribly depressed about her life.
Isabella's discontent began with behavioral issues in early childhood that, while never fully disclosed to the public, were severe enough to warrant a temporary relocation. Yes, at age 7, Isabella was sent to live with her biological father, Robert, in hopes that he'd be able to provide the discipline she was supposedly missing in her life. However, a fraught relationship with Robert's new wife meant by the time Isabella moved back in with Young-mi and Ryan at age 14, her attitude problem was far from cured. Indeed, Isabella's teenage years were just as turbulent as her childhood, if not more. Shoplifting at a local mall, trespassing, getting into fights. These were just some of the ways Isabella occupied her time when she wasn't holding up in her bedroom smoking marijuana. And it was with the same reckless nature that the teen approached her education, whether that was getting expelled for bringing a knife to class, scrapping with schoolmates, or just ahead of graduation in grade 12, dropping out. Yet, despite the teen's laundry list of transgressions, at home, she lived like nothing short of a princess, even sleeping in the master bedroom, while her mother was confined to a smaller room upstairs and her stepdad to the basement. At 18 years old, things didn't get any better. There was a reason why Young-mi and Ryan tiptoed around their own home, as Isabella did as she pleased. After all, simmering below the surface of Isabella's often straight-faced demeanor was a rage they'd come to know well.
She is very hot-tempered.
Hot-tempered, okay.
Very hot-tempered person. And she runs her mouth like crazy. F you, F this, F that.
Isabella was the force in the household that no one wanted to reckon with. As history proved, something as simple as her stepfather asking her to return a fan could lead to a physical altercation. Still, there was one primary target for Isabella's aggression: her mother. Yes, Young-mi and her daughter were known to butt heads, with Isabella's drug use being a point of contention between the two. Yet, by late August 2013, there was something different that had begun looming over their exchanges, something that had Yeon-mi fearing for her life. On the night of August 27th, weeks of intensifying anger towards her mother accumulated when Isabella took her resentment to new extremes.
She said that Isabella had threatened her or cursed at her, and spit in her face.
Yeon-mi had walked away from an exchange rattled and frightened. She told Ryan that she felt uncomfortable with Isabella in the house and asked him to sleep in her room for the night. The next day, Yeon-mi received a strange email from her daughter that included the words, "You will pay," a statement that would turn out not to be a threat, but a promise. Stranger still, the message, despite clearly being intended for Yeon-mi, was addressed to another name.
It was kind of funny. She sent it to my wife, but she made it out to Cecilia.
Desperate, Yeon-mi called her ex-husband and pleaded for him to speak with their daughter. Hearing the fear in his ex-wife's voice, Robert agreed. He came over to the house and sat in the backyard with Isabella, looking at the greenery and the animals while giving his best shot at a father-daughter chat about the importance of respecting your elders. "I thought that I made progress," Robert would later recall, but as events of just a few hours later would prove, he hadn't. At the time, it seemed even Yeon-mi had her doubts that the talk would be enough to get through to her daughter, as while they were still in the backyard, the mother called in reinforcements.
Hello, 911, where is your emergency?
Yes, my daughter needs help.
Yeon-mi proceeded to ask for law enforcement to pay a visit to her house on 2624 South Lima Street, an address officers were already familiar with. This was a household they'd been called to before, usually by neighbors who mistook Isabella's boyfriends that jumped the backyard fence of her home in order to sneak into her room for actual intruders. This call, however, was different. Yeon-mi told the dispatcher she feared her daughter might hurt herself or someone else.
She planning to hurt me last night, and I think she snapped. Her mind is gone.
After all, this wasn't the first time Isabella had expressed concerning impulses.
Okay, has she ever tried to hurt herself before or say she wanted to do this before?
She said many times she wanted to kill herself.
Yes, Isabella's mental health had been on a decline for a while now, with the parents even enlisting the services of a professional a few years back.
She went to a psychiatrist for maybe a month, and the psychiatrist said, no, she's fine. She's just a typical girl.
But what Isabella was now exhibiting wasn't typical girl behavior, and her mother no longer felt safe in her home.
I'm afraid of my life now.
Despite the desperation and urgency present from the mother's end of the line, when she learned what intervention from law enforcement might lead to, Yeon-mi became emotional.
And then what happened?
They'll transfer her to a psychiatric hospital, and they'll help her out there, okay?
It was a devastating final resort for the mother, who simply wanted to be able to coexist with her daughter. Feelings she expressed to Isabella in a note she'd given her that read, "To my dearest daughter Isabella, even though we have some differences, I let you know I love you and I will always love you, Mom." Yet, as the dispatcher pointed out, there were worse alternatives.
If something bad were to happen, you'd regret that worse, okay?
But when it came to regrets, it wasn't Yeon-mi who had to live with them, but everyone who failed to prevent the events that would unfold later that night. When 4 police officers arrived at the home to complete a welfare check, they sat down with Isabella, Robert, and Yeon-mi. During their conversation, they asked Isabella if she was considering ending her own life, a question that only seemed to humor the teen. "Why would someone as beautiful as me do something like that?" she asked, laughing. An odd response. Sure, but it was enough to satisfy the officers that Isabella had no intent to harm herself. As for her fight with her mother, well, law enforcement left the daughter with a warning that since she was 18, it was within her mother's legal right to kick her out of the house, a revelation that seemed to quiet Isabella. And so, believing the issue had been resolved, the officers left the premises, not knowing they'd be returning to that familiar address on South Lima Street hours later. Isabella seemed to calm down and spent the rest of her day in her room while Yeon-mi went back to work.
She seemed okay. She was friendly. Her dad gave her a big hug, but I don't think she was very happy that her mom called the police.
No, Isabella wasn't happy at all, and soon enough, her displeasure would be unmistakable. Yeon-mi returned from work at 9:30 p.m. with a bag of McDonald's in tow. She handed the takeout order to her husband and, noting her daughter's absence, asked if he knew where she was. Ryan was unsure and likely exhausted from work. The mother didn't push about her daughter's whereabouts any further. Instead, Yeon-mi went upstairs to take a shower, possibly hoping the day's events would wash away with soap and lather. Unfortunately, there was no erasing what happened hours before, just like there was no stopping what occurred moments after the mother turned the faucet on. Ryan was downstairs watching TV and eating the dinner Yeon-mi had thoughtfully brought home when he heard a series of bone-chilling sounds emanating from upstairs. Thumping, followed by his wife's voice, screaming his name. Ryan rushed upstairs and opened the bathroom door, or at least attempted to. Someone, however, was pushing their weight against the door, and through the crack, he could see her figure, Isabella. Once the door closed, she immediately locked it. Still, through sound alone, it was clear to the stepfather this was no private mother-daughter chit-chat.
Isabella was in a rage like I've never seen before. I could just hear her just pummeling my wife. I thought she was just hitting her with her fists.
In response, Ryan sprinted downstairs and dialed 911, where he quickly filled the dispatcher in on the situation.
Yes, my stepdaughter, 18-year-old stepdaughter, is beating my wife up.
And while the husband couldn't tell the dispatcher whether a weapon was involved or if paramedics would be required at the scene, from what he could hear, his wife needed intervention, and fast.
What are you hearing at this time? What do you hear?
I hear her yelling for God to help her.
But moments later, the dark truth of what his stepdaughter had done was no longer just auditory, but seeping towards him.
Oh my goodness, there's blood coming through the door.
Okay.
That's when Ryan heard his wife of 13 years mutter her last words, Jehovah. After that, the screams, the cries for help, the nonstop thumping all went quiet.
Yuni.
With no response from his wife, he called to Isabella, who had only 2 words for her stepfather. Hold on. Moments later, the door swung open to reveal Isabella wielding with a blood-stained knife.
And I looked down and I saw my wife on the floor. Blood everywhere, all over the bathroom.
Isabella blankly stared past Ryan and proceeded to walk forward, down the stairs, and out of the house, leaving her stepfather to take in the aftermath.
What did you do?
Is the door open?
Oh my God.
What happened?
I think my wife is dead.
What?
Yeon-mi laid nude on the back of the bathroom floor, covered in blood. An abandoned baseball bat laid beside her. Still on the other line, the dispatcher told Ryan to attempt CPR while he waited for emergency services to arrive.
Check to see if your wife is breathing.
Oh my God, there's so much blood.
But as Ryan tried to resuscitate his wife, no breaths came from Yeon-mi. The only sound in the room were the husband's attempts at chest compressions and the steady flow of water, the shower the mother had set for herself still running. And from the look in her eyes, Ryan knew his efforts were futile. Yeon-mi was gone. Officers arrived at the scene at 10:16 p.m., and Yeon-mi was pronounced dead at 10:28 p.m., just under an hour after she had arrived home that night. Isabella, however, was nowhere in sight, and since her cell phone had been turned off, there was no way to track the 18-year-old's location. And so, a manhunt for Isabella Guzman began. Last spotted in a pink sports bra and turquoise shorts, the public was warned not to let looks deceive them. Isabella was armed and dangerous.
With breaking news in Aurora this morning, police are now looking for this woman. They're calling her a suspect in a deadly stabbing overnight.
But as police looked over the crime scene for clues about Isabella's crimes and whereabouts,
this is the house in question. This white house here, you can see the yellow tape blocking off, and they've also got the road blocked off as well.
At a nearby H-Mart, a young woman was walking through the aisles, covered in blood. Yes, wearing the same clothing she'd slain her mother in. Isabella went to the store to pick up some basic necessities and used their restroom to wash her hair in the sink and throw out some stained clothing. Of course, the presence of the bloody shopper had not escaped glances from employees or customers, and in response to their concerns, Isabella fed them a story, and in this tale, she was the victim. The teen claimed she had fallen prey to an attempted SA, pleading for the patrons and workers not to call police, who would send her home, where she feared what her father might do. The story was convincing, with one woman even taking pity on Isabella and buying her underwear, menstrual products, and bandages. But while Isabella might have been able to escape the excursion without suspicion, she wasn't on the run for long. See, the next day, law enforcement received a report involving a blue Jeep Wrangler in a parking garage at 2851 South Parker Road that appeared to contain, well, someone's body. However, when officers arrived at the scene, there was no body to be found. But that's not to say the vehicle wasn't of interest. After all, sitting just outside of the Jeep was a backpack and clothing relating to yesterday's homicide. Quickly, officers began searching the garage.
They bring out a K9, they start to do a search of the garage.
And it wasn't long before Isabella, attempting to escape their notice, made her presence clear.
One of the plainclothes officers, or some of them, saw Isabella trying to walk away from everybody, just kind of nonchalant.
That's when officers pulled out their firearms and ordered her onto the ground, apprehending their suspect at 11:30 a.m., nearly 15 hours after the hunt began.
This booking photo just released of the 18-year-old now held without bond for investigation of first-degree murder.
Meanwhile, Isabella's family was still in shock. Her father, who was reportedly heartbroken over the loss of his ex-wife, couldn't make sense of what his daughter had done. Isabella is a good kid, but I don't know what could have happened, honestly, to provoke this kind of reaction, he told local news. I can't believe it. It's like a nightmare. Her aunt, Melanie Guzman, also believed this was out of character. She told the Denver Post she visited a couple months ago, and Isabella had seemed like your average teenager, spoiled by her mother, moody maybe, but not murderous. She believed there had to be something more to it. Her demeanor is pretty sweet. She's very coquette. I can see her yelling, screaming, and storming off, and locking herself in her room and turning on her iPod, she told the paper, but not being violent like that. Then again, maybe they didn't know Isabella that well after all, and perhaps neither did law enforcement. See, it turned out the young woman they apprehended in the parking garage that matched the height, weight, and appearance of their suspect wasn't Isabella at all, or so she claimed. Yep, according to their detainee, the officers were terribly mistaken.
You got the wrong girl.
No, we don't.
But yes, the suspect insisted they did, and she could prove it. See, the teen claimed her name wasn't even Isabella.
I am Samantha Gonzalez.
And while she could admit she vaguely resembled their suspect,
There are people in this world who look alike, you know.
these similarities were pure chance.
What kind of a grand coincidence would it be that you just happen to look like this person?
Grand coincidence. It's a coincidence.
As for the differences between herself and Isabella, well, according to the detainee, those were clear as day. For starters, their size.
So she's 110 pounds? That's really skinny. I'm 148 pounds.
Isabella, please.
Then, there was their completely opposing moral compasses.
I
Make you
didn't
feel
kill
good?
anybody. That's
Did it
disgusting.
it feel good?
That's disgusting. You guys really think I'm a murderer?
And as for their stomach for gore, that too was incompatible.
Did it make you feel powerful?
Ew. Just you.
Yes, Samantha was convinced this was a case of mistaken identity, and when she gave them her fingerprints, she would be freed. Until then, she'd wait for her name to be cleared and an overdue apology from her interrogators. After all, there was no way she was going to confess to a crime she didn't commit.
I'm not gonna lie to you and tell you I'm a murderer.
But who was Samantha Gonzalez anyway? Well, in Samantha's own words,
I'm a perfectly normal girl.
Perfectly normal?
Yeah.
and while that was open for debate, the backstory she provided detectives was anything but. Originally from Cincinnati, Ohio, Samantha claimed she was born to a woman named Sabrina Hicks, someone who only deserved the title of mother when speaking biologically. No, Sabrina didn't possess a nurturing bone in her body. In fact, according to Samantha, her mother despised her because she was illegitimate and in turn blamed her for ruining her marriage. As for who her father was, given her mother's promiscuity, she couldn't say.
All I know is that my dad's Mexican. That's why my last name is Gonzalez.
And when it came to how she ended up in that parking garage, the self-proclaimed 15-year-old runaway told detectives she had fled her home state, taking the bus to be with her boyfriend Gabriel in Colorado, who was currently waiting at his apartment for her. Yet, despite the impressively fleshed out personal history, the gaps in the suspect's story quickly revealed themselves as detectives began asking questions. See, if Samantha really was who she said she was, why didn't she know her mother's birthday or where she worked? Why couldn't she provide contact information for any of the people she named? And why did the addresses she gave for places like her home and school exist in Aurora but not in her home city?
Maybe they don't know every single address in all of Cincinnati.
It's the freaking police department. If they don't know, who knows?
Yes. From her appearance to the blade injuries on her hand, it was clearly not Samantha Gonzalez that sat across from detectives, but Isabella Guzman. Yet, she refused to give up the charade, even when confronted with a photo of herself.
She's
pretty.
Yeah, you're a pretty girl.
Or when identified by her father.
Who's that?
That's my baby.
Okay.
Who are you?
Hey, Robert, why don't you come on back out here for a second? Do you recognize her?
Yeah, she's my daughter.
What's her name?
Isabella.
And unfortunately for detectives, Isabella wasn't the one losing their cool under the pressure of the interrogation. They were.
You're acting like you're running this investigation.
Abandoning any pretense of providing a safe space for their suspect to confess, detectives had resorted to name-calling and insults in the face of Isabella's deception.
People who do what you did, soulless.
Did you hear me? I don't think you're a normal person. You have no conscience. None. No, you're one of the most evil person I've ever sat across the table from.
Prove me right.
Don't tell me how to do my job.
You guys are really mean.
Yeah.
And as their tantrum continued,
stop calling me Isabella.
That's your name.
No, it's not.
It is too.
No, it isn't.
It became clear if anyone had control of the interrogation room, it was Isabella.
You got the wrong girl. You made a genuine mistake. People make mistakes. It's okay. I'm not mad at you.
Still, by the end of the interrogation, even she was snapping.
This girl, your mother did. She is not me.
That's you.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
No, it isn't. And I'm really angry that you ruined my fucking day and made it even worse.
Well, welcome to the rest of your life.
But even as the team broke down, even swiveling her chair to cry in the corner at one point, she was adamant that the evidence of her innocence was staring back at them.
I'm not going to jail unless you Photoshop my eyes.
Okay.
You see her face? She has brown eyes.
And so did the girl facing detectives in the interrogation room. So why was she pretending otherwise? Or perhaps this wasn't pretend, at least not for Isabella. See, when detectives interviewed people who knew the suspect, it became clear the teen had recently gone through some changes. According to her friend Darian, while Isabella had been experimenting with marijuana for a while, she'd recently gotten into a harder substance that in at least one situation had led to a violent altercation between herself and another female.
So it was actually a physical fight?
Yeah, physical fight. It was a confrontation.
Okay.
Darian told detectives he'd noticed a change in attitude from Isabella recently, as the formerly talkative teen went from outgoing to quiet and emotionless. And then there were those bizarre ramblings he'd witnessed about her recent ex, Isla, known as Tony among friends, who she accused of being a psychopath, as well as some darker practices.
So she was saying that Tony was doing black magic?
He was like, he's doing black magic and putting spells on people that f***ing him over or something like that.
Isla was also interviewed by detectives and claims that before the murder, Isabella had started saying things that didn't seem to be rooted in reality, including accusing him of cheating on her with their friend Kathy. After that, the 3-year relationship ended, and on the day of the murder, while Isla visited Isabella's house to return some items of hers, things quickly took an ugly turn.
She swung at me with the golf club. Okay. Did she say anything? She hates me.
But while her sudden hatred towards him may have come as a surprise, Isabella's feelings about her mother and her stepfather were no secret. Isla told detectives that over their relationship, Isabella had accused Yeonmi and Ryan of starving her and attempting to poison her and their dogs. At one point, Isla claimed Isabella even confided in him that her mother had suggested a pat of sorts.
Her mom started poking herself in the head with scissors?
Yes.
And wanted her and Isabella to die together?
Kathy, the friend Isabella had accused Isla of having an affair with, also had strange interactions with the suspect recently. She told detectives her relationship with Isabella was fine until she received a message from her days before the murder.
I was taking a shower, and I think that was Monday of that week. I think a few days before it happened.
Okay.
And she texted me, "You fucking nasty slut, I know what you did."
When she asked Isabella to explain, she didn't respond. However, she did text Kathy once more on August 28th, the day of the murder, at 7:16 p.m., a message the friend still couldn't make sense of.
"The astral being has awakened."
Just over 2 hours after Isabella sent that text, she took her mother's life. So, was Isabella's behavior towards friends, family, and detectives some sort of elaborate ruse to evade consequences for her actions?
You're not insane. You're a mean person.
I'm not a mean person.
And you're a liar.
Or were these the delusions of a teenage girl in the midst of an untreated mental health crisis?
I'm not Isabella!
Well, that was now a matter for the court to decide. Isabella's arraignment was scheduled for the morning of September 5th, 2013. However, the time slot came and went without any sign of the teenager in court.
She was due in court this morning, but court officials told us she didn't want to leave her jail cell at the Arapahoe County Detention Center.
It wasn't until Isabella was forcibly removed from her cell that she appeared in Arapahoe County Court later that afternoon, with her wrists and ankles shackled together. Here, before Judge Stephen F. Collins, she received her charge, first-degree murder, which, given that Isabella was legally an adult, meant she was eligible for the death penalty. But despite the serious charges and testimony that clarified young Me was not stabbed the reported 79 times, but a shocking 151 times, these weren't the developments in the case that the media focused on. Instead, it was Isabella's facial expressions that stole the limelight.
The 18-year-old smirked at the camera as she stood up and walked to the defense table this afternoon.
Yes, snarky, confused, sad. These were just some of the emotions that played across Isabella's face while hearing the charges against her. And then, the one-woman emotional roller coaster delivered a mysterious gesture.
After the judge read the complaint against her, she looked over, stared at the camera, and motioned to the area under each of her eyes with her index finger.
Without any context, it's possible viewers would have thought Isabella was pointing towards her tears. However, knowing what occurred during the interrogation and what Isabella believed would exonerate her,
"I'm not going to jail unless you Photoshop my eyes."
Was it possible she was still under the delusion they had the wrong girl? Still, even if Isabella did believe she was Samantha Gonzalez, this didn't explain why she had taken her mother's life on the night of August 28th. However, as the coming months would reveal, her supposed mental state on that night was just as altered. 2 months after her first court appearance, in December 2013, Isabella pleaded not guilty. Yet, this wasn't because she hadn't carried out the crime. No, there was no question Isabella was responsible for the gruesome murder of young Me. However, her defense argued she could not be found responsible for reasons of insanity. Following that plea, she was sent to a state mental hospital for evaluation, and her stay at the facility wasn't rushed, as doctors monitored her and tweaked medications to see how they affected her psychological state for almost a year before she appeared in court again in June 2014. But what had the experts found? Well, according to Dr. Richard Pounds, Isabella's attorneys were correct. There were obvious signs of hallucinating. The doctor testified she was staring into space, having conversations with people who were not present, and she was laughing at herself. Given her symptoms, Dr. Pounds was confident with his diagnosis, paranoid schizophrenia. Isabella's evaluation revealed she'd been battling with undiagnosed delusions brought on by this mental illness for years prior to the incident. And on the night of the murder, Isabella had been convinced of a false reality that proved not only detrimental, but deadly. According to Dr. Pounds, Isabella didn't know she was ending her own mother's life, but rather was under a delusion that she was taking the life of a woman named Cecilia, the same name she'd addressed her mother by in her "You will pay" email. This sacrifice, Isabella believed in her deluded state was the only way to save the world. After revealing the results of the medical evaluation, Judge George Brauchler accepted Isabella's plea, telling the court, "We punish people who make decisions to do wrong when they knew better and they could have done something differently. And in this particular case, I am convinced, based on the evidence that I've seen and the information that's been presented in court, that this woman did not know right from wrong, and she could not have acted differently than she did, given the significant schizophrenia and paranoid delusions, audible, visual hallucinations that she was going through." But that didn't mean Isabella could walk free.
Instead of going to trial, she's being sent to the Colorado Mental Health Institute of Pueblo.
It's here she would stay until she could prove that she was no longer a threat to herself or society, whether that took days, years, or the rest of her life. And while Isabella remained in the custody of the Institute, her story, and more so her appearance, was free for the public to analyze, and in return, fangirl over as they pleased. 7 years later, in 2020, footage from Isabella's trial went viral across social media, but nowhere was it more decontextualized than TikTok. Various videos went viral across the platform, with posts that mainly focused on her appearance rather than the less glamorous details of the case. "Who knew evil had the prettiest face? Leave her alone, she's so cute." Comments on this content described Isabella as their type and crush, or as one user put it, "Mama, I'm in love with a criminal." A trend even developed where users tried to mimic the murderer's expressions and movements during her court appearance, often pairing the reenactments with Ava Max's Sweet But Psycho, a song that's been criticized by mental health organizations for stigmatizing mental illness.
This was dubbed the Isabella Guzman Challenge, where creators would try and imitate the smirk that she did in the court trial.
And it wasn't long before a fan base had sprouted to defend Isabella's actions.
There was even people who had made fan pages about her.
Still, while some users were able to look past her crime, or even excuse it, she wouldn't have killed her mom if her mom didn't treat her well. For me, it's her mom's fault, but it's good Isabella has a good life now. Many were unsettled by social media's treatment of Isabella Guzman.
The generation that we're living in and the generation of younger kids, guys, it's truly scary. It's truly, truly scary.
Pretty privileged this is, but how did experts view the case? According to criminal profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole, parents should view the murder as a warning to take symptoms of mental illness in their children seriously.
Too often families look at their children and say, well, that they're just going through a phase. They're just like old Uncle Jimmy was when he was growing up. They try to make it normal. It's not normal. They absolutely need to get mental health intervention before it gets to the point where there's a physical attack, and in this case, a homicide.
As for the verdict, well, while YouTuber and licensed professional counselor of mental health, Dr. Todd Grande, noted it's not typical for a defendant, even when their schizophrenia is proven, to escape jail time. The facility Isabella was sent to was by no means a lighter sentence.
Even when killers are found not criminally responsible, they often spend the rest of their lives in a mental hospital, which as far as living conditions is no better than prison. Actually, in many cases, a mental hospital is much worse.
And from what the media have recently heard from Isabella, it seems she would agree with Todd's assessment. In November 2020, Isabella campaigned for her release from the Colorado Mental Health Institute of Pueblo to CBS 4's Rick Salinger. During the interview, she claimed that, through medication, the vial her psychosis once cast over reality had lifted.
I was not myself when I did that, and I have since been restored to full health. I'm not mentally ill anymore. I'm not a danger to myself or others.
Yet, despite expressing regret for her actions,
if I could change it or if I could take it back, I would.
Her remorse wasn't without excuses.
I was abused at home by my family for many years. My parents are Jehovah's Witnesses. And I left the religion when I was 14, and the abuse at home worsened after I quit.
See, according to Isabella, while she walked away from August 28, 2013 alive, that didn't mean she was unscathed.
The fight with my mom was terrible, and I was injured in the process. I have the scars on my hands. I don't know if you can see or not.
And since Isabella's sentencing, her time in the facility had not been easy. In 2015, she filed a police report that claimed she had been essayed in the institute by a hospital employee in a closet.
He asked me if I wanted to go in there and look through to get some clothing, so I did. The other patient left, and he went in there and shut the door behind him.
After that, she claimed this had happened twice more with the same employee.
I was afraid that if I didn't do what he wanted, that he could ruin my life.
And while Isabella said she wanted the staff member prosecuted, at the time of the interview, the district attorney's office in Pueblo claimed the hospital police hadn't made any such case known to them. However, when CBS 4 checked back in with Guzman, she mentioned she met with the Pueblo County District Attorney's Office and was informed that given the passage of time and the way the hospital wrote the report, it would be difficult for her to pursue charges. Instead, under their advice, she's contacting the ACLU. And what about Isabella's bid for freedom? Well, as of June 2021, some leeway has been given.
A judge has now ruled she can leave the state hospital for group therapy and other types of therapy. She will be required to wear a GPS tracker.
But as for now, that's as far as Isabella's freedom will go, as she continues to serve her stay at the Colorado Mental Health Institute of Pueblo indefinitely. While it remains open for debate whether Isabella was fueled with rage, festering resentment, delusions, or a combination of all three on the night she took her mother's life.
You scared the hell out of me, because you have no conscience.
I scare the hell out of you?
Yeah, you have no conscience.
From her uncontrollable behavior that manifested in childhood.
The warning signs went back years. They didn't just start 2 or 3 days before the homicide. The mother allegedly was very fearful of her daughter.
To her mother's desperate pleas for help.
Court documents indicate that Isabella Guzman had a contentious relationship with her mom, and that her mom was concerned enough that she called police on August 28th.
And I'm afraid tonight she's gonna hurt herself or hurt me.
It's clear that despite Isabella's harmless appearance,
it was hard to imagine Isabella with such a sweet face could carry out such a vicious act.
And the countless excuses that were made for her.
I knew she was mad at her mom, and I knew she was very, very upset at her mom, but I had no idea she would ever do anything like this.
By summer 2013, the teen was just a few preventable altercations away from what transpired on the night of August 28th.
If I could change it or if I could take it back, I would.
This is the story of Isabella Guzman, a daughter who took the life of her mother for reasons we may never fully understand.